I'm 108 now, and many memories have slipped away. I can't recall the name of my first teacher or the friends from my early years. But one memory remains crystal clear: the day I met Lyra, the human who changed my life forever. It was a freezing morning on our planet, Saldara. I stood with my mother at the spaceport, waiting behind a large, transparent barrier. My heart was heavy with dread. "Why do we have to take in a human, Mom?" I asked, frustration clear in my voice. "Because it's the Council's decision," she replied firmly. Now stop complaining. As the ship docked with a loud hiss, my anxiety grew. I didn't understand why a human had to live with us. To me, it seemed ridiculous. The doors of the spacecraft opened, and out came Lyra, clutching a small backpack and looking around with wide, curious eyes. She was small and fragile, her long hair flowing in the breeze. She looked so different from us, and I couldn't help but think humans were odd creatures. Lyra was led by my father, Commander Tarvok, who had been tasked with bringing her here. He was a stern, imposing figure, and seeing him with this tiny human felt surreal. I pressed my face against the cold glass, muttering, "She's not staying in my room." My mother gently shushed me and led me to the entrance. My father approached, carrying Lyra in his arms. My parents exchanged greetings, and my father handed me a small, intricately carved object from Lyra's home planet. I tried to voice my protests, but my father silenced me with a stern look. The day felt like the beginning of a nightmare, especially with the odd, soft sounds Lyra was making. I stormed away, my frustration boiling over. In my haste, I tripped and fell down a flight of stairs, landing awkwardly and hurting my leg. I lay there, seething in pain and anger, when Lyra approached. She was still teary-eyed, but remarkably composed. She knelt beside me, her face full of concern. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "I think I broke my leg," I groaned, wincing in pain. "Get up," my father commanded as he arrived. "We don't show weakness." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes fierce. "He can't walk," she stated firmly. "You need to help him." My father hesitated, clearly taken aback by her boldness. He was not used to being challenged, especially by a child. But Lyra didn't back down. She stayed beside me, her tiny frame unyielding. After a long moment, my father relented. "Fine. But you must understand the rules if you're going to stay here." He lifted me into his arms, and for the first time, I felt his strength and warmth in a way I had never known. Lyra followed us, her determination unwavering. That day, I began to understand that true strength wasn't just about physical power or authority. It was about compassion and standing up for others. As we left the spaceport, I realized that this small human girl had more courage and heart than I had ever imagined. And this was just the start of the many lessons she would teach me about what it truly means to be strong. Lyra settled into our home, and over the next few weeks, I couldn't help but be curious about her. She was unlike anyone I had ever known. Her kindness and willingness to help were traits I found confusing but intriguing. My leg had healed, but my pride still smarted from the way she had stood up to my father. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Lyra told us stories about Earth. Her eyes sparkled as she spoke of vast oceans, towering forests, and bustling cities. She described the warmth of the sun and the chill of winter, painting vivid pictures with her words. "What's it like to live on Earth?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. "It's beautiful," Lyra replied with a smile, "but it's also challenging. We have to work together to survive. That's why humans are so good at helping each other." Her words stayed with me, and I found myself thinking about them often. On Zaldara, we valued strength and independence above all else. But Lyra showed me a different way of thinking. She was always there to lend a hand, whether it was helping my mother with chores or assisting me with my studies. One day, while we were out exploring the nearby woods, a sudden storm hit. The wind howled, and rain poured down in sheets. We took shelter under a large ancient tree, huddling together to stay dry. "We should head back," I suggested. shouting over the roar of the storm. Lyra nodded, but just as we were about to leave, we heard a faint cry for help. Through the pouring rain, we saw a small, injured creature trapped under a fallen branch. It was one of the native animals of Zaldara, a delicate, feathered creature known as a kora. Without hesitation, Lyra ran to the creature's side. "We have to help it," she exclaimed. I hesitated. On Zaldara, we were taught to focus on our own survival. Helping others, especially animals, was not a priority. But Lyra's determination was unwavering. Together, we lifted the heavy branch, freeing the kora. It was injured, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. Lyra cradled it gently in her arms, her face set with resolve. "We need to get it to safety," she said. "It won't survive out here in the storm." I was amazed by her bravery and compassion. Despite the harsh weather, Lyra carried the injured creature all the way back to our home. Once there, she tended to its wounds with care, using what little knowledge she had of Zaldaran biology. Over the next few days, the kora began to recover, thanks to Lyra's efforts. Watching her nurse the creature back to health, I realized that strength wasn't just about physical power. It was about compassion, empathy, and the willingness to help those in need. My father, who had been skeptical of Lyra at first, began to see her in a new light. One evening, he pulled me aside. "She's different from us," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But perhaps that's not a bad thing. We could learn a lot from her," I nodded, understanding what he meant. Lyra had shown me a side of strength I had never considered. Her kindness and courage had made me see the world differently. As the kora took flight again, soaring into the sky with a graceful ease, I felt a sense of pride and admiration for Lyra. She had taught me that true strength came from the heart. And in that moment, I knew that having her in our lives was the best thing that had ever happened to us. The storm had passed, but the lessons Lyra taught me would stay with me forever. She had shown me what it truly meant to be strong, and for that, I would always be grateful. Months passed, and Lyra became an integral part of our family. Her presence brought warmth and kindness that we hadn't known before. Despite the initial doubts, even my father began to appreciate her. She had a way of making everyone around her feel valued and cared for, and I found myself growing closer to her each day. One crisp morning, as the three of us sat around the breakfast table, an urgent message came through on my father's communicator. His expression grew serious as he listened to the transmission. When he ended the call, he turned to us with a grave look on his face. "There's been an attack on one of our outposts," he said. "The Dravens have launched a surprise assault. I have to leave immediately to join the defense." Fear gripped me. The Dravens were a fierce and ruthless race, known for their brutal tactics. My father had fought them before, but this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and the danger was more immediate. Lyra looked at my father with a determined expression. "We'll help in any way we can," she said firmly. My father hesitated, then nodded. "Take care of each other," he said, before turning to leave. "And stay safe." As the days passed, news of the conflict grew more dire. The Dravens were relentless, and our forces were struggling to hold them back. The tension in our home was palpable. My mother and I did our best to keep busy, but the worry for my father's safety was ever present. One evening, Lyra and I were sitting outside, looking up at the stars. The night was calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil in our hearts. "I wish there was more we could do," I said, feeling helpless. Lyra turned to me, her eyes shining with determination. "We can make a difference, even from here," she said. "We can help the wounded, support the families, and do our part to keep hope alive." Her words sparked something in me. Inspired by her unwavering spirit, we decided to organize a support effort. We gathered supplies, medical aid, and food, and reached out to the community for help. Together, we created a network to assist those affected by the war. The response was overwhelming. People came together, united by a common cause. Lyra's kindness and leadership were at the heart of it all. She coordinated the efforts, ensuring that everyone had a role to play. Her empathy and compassion shone through, inspiring others to give their best. One day, while we were distributing supplies at a makeshift shelter, a young Thalaxian soldier approached us. He was injured, his arm bandaged, but his eyes were filled with gratitude. "Thank you for what you're doing," he said, his voice shaking. "You have no idea how much this means to us." Lyra smiled warmly. "We're all in this together," she replied. "Stay strong and know that you're not alone." As the soldier walked away, I felt a deep sense of pride and admiration for Lyra. She had shown me that true strength wasn't just about fighting on the battlefield. It was about supporting those in need, lifting others up, and spreading hope, even in the darkest of times. The war raged on, but our efforts made a difference. The community grew stronger, united by the bonds we had forged. Lyra had become a beacon of hope, her kindness and courage lighting the way for others. One evening, as we sat by the fire, my mother turned to Lyra. "You've brought something precious to our lives," she said softly. "Thank you for showing us what it means to be truly strong." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the flames. "It's not just me," she said. "We all have that strength within us. We just need to believe in it." As I looked at Lyra, I knew she was right. She had taught us that true strength came from the heart, from the willingness to care for others and to stand together in the face of adversity. And in that moment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the human who had shown me what it truly meant to be strong. The conflict with the Dravins continued, and every day brought new challenges. The support network we had built became a lifeline for many, and Lyra's leadership was crucial. Her unwavering spirit inspired everyone around her, and I found myself drawing strength from her courage. One morning, as we were preparing supplies, a distress call came through on the communicator. A nearby village had been attacked, and they desperately needed help. Lyra and I didn't hesitate. We gathered medical supplies and food and set out immediately. The journey to the village was fraught with danger. The roads were rough, and the threat of Draven patrols loomed. But Lyra's determination never wavered. She led the way, her eyes set with a fierce resolve. When we arrived, the village was in chaos. Buildings were damaged, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke. We quickly set up a makeshift clinic and began tending to the wounded. The villagers were scared and in pain, but Lyra's calm and reassuring presence brought them comfort. As we worked, I noticed a young girl, no older than 10, sitting alone, crying. Her arm was injured, and she looked terrified. Lyra immediately went to her, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "Hey there," Lyra said softly. "It's going to be okay. We're here to help." The girl looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "My family. I can't find them," she sobbed. Lyra gently took her hand. "We'll find them, I promise. But first, let's take care of that arm." She carefully bandaged the girl's wound, her touch gentle and soothing. The girl began to calm down, her sobs turning to quiet sniffles. Lyra's kindness and patience were remarkable, and I couldn't help but feel a deep admiration for her. After the girl was treated, Lyra and I set out to find her family. We searched through the village, calling out their names. Eventually, we found them huddled in a damaged building, unharmed but frightened. The reunion was tearful and full of relief, and I felt a surge of pride for what we had accomplished. As the day wore on, we continued to help the villagers, providing medical aid and distributing supplies. Lyra's energy seemed boundless, and her positive attitude lifted everyone's spirits. Even in the face of such devastation, she managed to find hope. That evening, as we sat around a small fire, exhausted but content, Lyra turned to me. "You did great today," she said with a smile. "I'm proud of you." I felt a warmth spread through me at her words. "I couldn't have done it without you," I replied. "You've taught me so much about what it means to be strong." Lyra shook her head. "Strength isn't just about physical power or bravery. It's about caring for others, even when it's hard. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter the cost." Her words resonated deeply with me. I had always believed that strength was about being tough and unyielding, But Lyra had shown me a different kind of strength, one that was rooted in compassion and empathy. As the fire crackled and the stars began to fill the night sky, I realized how much I had changed since Lyra came into my life. She had taught me to see the world differently, to value kindness and courage in a way I never had before. The next morning, we left the village with a renewed sense of purpose. There was still so much to do, and the war was far from over. But with Lyra by my side, I felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As we walked back to our home, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the human who had shown me what it truly meant to be strong. Her courage and compassion had changed my life, and I knew that together we could overcome any obstacle. The days turned into weeks, and the war with the Dravins continued to escalate. Our support efforts grew more critical as more villages and outposts came under attack. Lyra's determination never wavered, and her unwavering spirit continued to inspire everyone around her. One fateful day, we received a message that sent chills down my spine. The Dravins had launched a massive offensive against the capital city of Zaldara. My father and the main defense force were holding the line, but they were severely outnumbered. The situation was dire. "We have to go," Lyra said, her voice filled with resolve. "They need all the help they can get." My mother was hesitant. "It's too dangerous," she warned. "You could get caught in the crossfire." Lyra looked at her with a fierce determination in her eyes. "If we don't go, more lives will be lost." "We have to do what we can." With a heavy heart, my mother agreed. We gathered all the supplies we could carry and set out for the capital. The journey was long and treacherous, but Lyra's resolve kept us moving forward. As we approached the city, the sounds of battle filled the air. The sky was dark with smoke, and the ground shook with the force of explosions. My heart pounded in my chest as we navigated through the chaos, but Lyra's calm presence was a beacon of hope. We reached the outskirts of the city and found a group of soldiers struggling to defend a makeshift barricade. They were wounded and exhausted, their faces etched with despair. Lyra immediately sprang into action, tending to their injuries and offering words of encouragement. "Stay strong," she urged them. "We're here to help. We won't let you fall." Her words seemed to breathe new life into the soldiers. They rallied, their spirits lifted by her unwavering determination. Together, we fortified the barricade and provided much-needed medical aid. As the battle raged on, we moved through the city, helping wherever we could. The Dravins were relentless, their forces overwhelming. But Lyra's courage never faltered. She stood by my side, a symbol of hope and resilience. At one point, we came across a group of civilians trapped in a collapsed building. The structure was unstable, and the risk of it collapsing further was high. But Lyra didn't hesitate. She crawled into the rubble, her small frame maneuvering through the narrow spaces. "Help me lift this," she called out to me, her voice steady despite the danger. Together, we worked to free the trapped civilians, one by one. The fear in their eyes turned to gratitude as Lyra guided them to safety. Her strength and determination were awe-inspiring, and I felt a deep sense of pride to be. As night fell, the battle showed no signs of stopping. The capital was in ruins, but the spirit of its defenders remained unbroken. Lyra and I continued to move through the city, helping wherever we could. In the early hours of the morning, we received word that the Dravins had breached the central command center. My father was among those holding the line, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. "We have to go to him," I said, fear gripping my heart. Lyra nodded, her expression resolute. "Let's go." We made our way to the command center, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. When we arrived, the scene was chaotic. My father and his men were fighting valiantly, but the Dravins were closing in. "Father," I called out, rushing to his side. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and determination. "Stay back, it's too dangerous." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "We're here to help. We won't let you fight alone." My father hesitated, then nodded. Together, we joined the fray, fighting alongside the defenders. The battle was fierce, but Lyra's presence was a source of strength. Her courage and compassion inspired everyone around her, and we fought with renewed vigor. As dawn broke, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Dravens, faced with our unyielding resolve, started to retreat. We had won a hard-fought victory, but the cost had been high. Exhausted and battered, we gathered in the aftermath of the battle. My father looked at Lyra with newfound respect. "You have shown us what true strength is," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you," Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the rising sun. "Strength comes from standing together," she said softly, "and from never giving up hope." As we stood there, surrounded by the ruins of our city, I knew that Lyra had changed our lives forever. She had shown us what it truly meant to be strong, and her courage and compassion had left an indelible mark. The victory in the capital was a turning point in the war, but the road to peace was still long and fraught with challenges. The Dravens, though retreating, were far from defeated. The council convened to discuss the next steps, and my father, now a hero in the eyes of many, was at the forefront of these discussions. Lyra and I continued our work, helping to rebuild the city and support the wounded. The bonds we had forged during the battle only grew stronger, and our community was more united than ever. Despite the ongoing conflict, there was a sense of hope and resilience that permeated the air. One evening, as we sat together under the stars, Lyra turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "There's something we need to do," she said. "We need to reach out to the Dravens and try to find a way to end this war." I was taken aback. "You think they'll listen?" She nodded. If we can show them that peace is possible, maybe we can save countless lives." The idea was bold, but Lyra's determination was unwavering. With my father's support, we arranged for a meeting with the Draven leaders. It was a risky move, but one that we hoped would pave the way for peace. The meeting was held in a neutral zone, far from the front lines. As we arrived, the tension was palpable. The Dravens were a formidable presence, their leaders stern and wary. But Lyra stepped forward with her usual grace and confidence. "Thank you for meeting with us," she began. "We have seen the devastation this war has caused on both sides. We believe there is a better way, a way to find peace and work together for a brighter future." The Draven leader, a tall, imposing figure named Tharak, eyed her with suspicion. "Why should we trust you?" Lyra's gaze was steady. "Because we have nothing to gain from more bloodshed. We want to find a solution that benefits both our peoples. We believe in the power of unity and compassion." For a moment, there was silence. Then Tharak spoke. "Your words are noble, human, but actions speak louder. Show us that you truly mean what you say." Lyra nodded. "We will prove it through our actions. Let us begin with a ceasefire, and we can work together to rebuild and heal." It was a tense and uncertain time, but the ceasefire was agreed upon. Over the next few weeks, we worked tirelessly to support both Zaldarans and Dravens, providing aid and fostering understanding. The effort was met with resistance at times, but Lyra's unwavering commitment never faltered. One day, as we were helping to rebuild a Draven settlement, a young Draven child approached us. He looked up at Lyra with wide eyes, his expression a mix of curiosity and awe. "Why do you help us?" he asked. "Aren't we enemies?" Lyra knelt down to his level, her smile warm and kind. "We help because we believe in a future where we can all live in peace. We are not enemies. We are all just people trying to live our lives." The child's eyes brightened. "I want to help too," he said. Lyra's actions and words began to change hearts and minds. Slowly but surely, the hostility began to fade. The ceasefire held, and tentative steps toward a lasting peace were taken. It was a difficult and complex process, but the foundation of trust was being built. As the months passed, the war that had once seemed endless began to feel like a distant memory. The Dravens and Zaldarans started to see each other not as enemies, but as potential allies. The path to peace was still long, but it was now a journey we were all willing to undertake together. One evening, as we stood on a hill overlooking the rebuilt city, my father turned to Lyra with a look of deep gratitude. "You have changed our world," he said. You have shown us the true meaning of strength. Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. Strength is not just about power. It's about compassion, unity, and the courage to do what's right. As I looked at her, I felt a deep sense of pride and admiration. Lyra had taught us all what it truly meant to be strong. Her courage and compassion had not only helped to end a war, but had also forged a new path for our future. The day Lyra showed me what it truly means to be strong was the day our world began to change for the better. And for that, I would always be grateful.